because they have the ability to affect the budgets. Because you can talk about something, but if it's not budgeted for, then it means there'll be no indication. When you even look at the proposed cuts in the budget and the Appropriation Act, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, we trace where is the money going? Where does the budget say what is going to be cut? Because yes, the executive can cut, but it can cut crucial areas for the citizens to feel the cut and them not to feel the cut. The cuts should be towards their recurrent expenditure, trips, any luxuries that are there, so that they actually budget for access to education, because the education question is large. It's not just about the health students, it's about free primary education. It's about access to books and facilities. It's about the access to school food that is given to some of the students in school. We have cases of people and children not being able to even have meals, and if it's not for the meal that is sometimes provided in schools, then there's nothing. There's no even access to even something that these young children are able to partake in. So the education problem is a larger problem that we need to deal with, even as we look at the current syllabus and curriculum. So it's not just us patching up with regards to help. Help is a smaller part of the larger education problem that we've been continuing to raise, that the government needs to have serious review and budget towards it, because it's not about promising and talking about it. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, so that we can actually see seriousness in improvement. Amanwa, maybe I didn't write notes. You could let me know the other areas that questions are, and then I can respond. But I see
Yeah, I think one of the questions
we have Abner here, we have
Yeah.
Lavance here. They can also answer some of these questions with regards to the law, so that where I missed that, they
Sure.
can fill in.
Sure. One of the concerns that was raised, I think, by BReal was which process should the members of the public take when they want to submit memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries. I don't know if you can take that. Then we can, of course, allow the other advocates on the forum to answer the questions that have been put forth. Madam President, are you there?
Repeat, Manuel.
The process that the members of the public should use to pass memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries before the vetting starts, and how Parliament can be able to have those views from the members of the public. Which process is available under the law?
Well, there's public participation that is supposed to be open to members of the public. You can share to the clerk of the National Assembly. You can share to us as the Law Society, because we'll be sharing our views as well. You can share to your member of parliament as members of the public. So public participation is open to each and every one individual, that you can share your personal views. You can raise memorandums as different groups, as the private sector, public sector. And so it's open. Public participation was the new part of the new changes brought under the Constitution, that members of the public can actually have their voice heard, that you don't need to wait for your member of the parliament. If your member of parliament is ignoring you, you can actually share your concerns, you can actually share your views. One of the laws chief was rendered unconstitutional because it failed on the threshold of actually carrying out public participation. If you see the rejected bill, Finance Act 2024, was because of the overwhelming public participation and the concern that members of the public even had, that they had raised their voices, they had complained, they had issued memorandum, and all of that was ignored. But people were able to share their views, even the Law Society and various groups, with regards to those that particular legislation and the effect and the impact. And so similarly, you can share your views writing to the clerk, and we'll look for his address and share, so that you can share your views to the National Assembly. We can share your views as well through the Law Society, and we'll forward all those views. And part of the Citizens Assembly is also for us to come up with joint solutions and recommendations of how we best think that we can share. And maybe it's time we thought about a platform for public participation that enables members of the public to be able to share their views without having to reach for any special numbers or email addresses, that we can actually have a platform that will track all the memorandum that has been shared, so that it's open and transparent, and they cannot say that they did not receive these emails, they did not receive these recommendations, that this number of people were not able to participate and they only got these few views. And as well, a platform that can be an online platform to ensure that as many people, irrespective of the difference in time or distance, we're able to ensure that as many people share their views and their concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think perhaps also the members of the public should know that if you go to the website of the National Assembly, you will find the respective emails of every other department in Parliament. You can be able to actually present your views through a memoranda, through those emails, and perhaps expect that they write back to you for a purpose of you presenting those views personally when the vetting process will be ongoing. I think there was a question that was asked about the constitution of the cabinet secretaries under the constitution. Article 152 provides for that process, and as you know, the president has powers to appoint a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 24. And I think Jatero asked questions about why the president will dismiss and reappoint the same people, and what implication that has on public expenditure and use and good use of public money. And I think that is a valid question. Some of those questions will be subject to a court process, so that the court can interpret as to whether, whereas the president has powers under Article 152 to hire and fire. And remember, the Gazette notice dismissing these cabinet secretaries was actually gazetted as dismissal. And a dismissal in its explanations and interpretation means you've been fired. And you can't be fired from an office if you didn't commit an offense. So why would you then name the same individuals? And I think that is a constitutional question as to whether the president has capacity to play around with Article 152, especially on the specific powers to dismiss and then purport to reappoint the same people. There are several constitutional questions that can only be answered by the court on that question. And of course, we are following up as the Law Society to ensure that the due process of the law, especially in appointment of cabinet secretaries, is followed. We are hoping that the members of parliament will rise to the occasion when these names are presented before them and forget about their political affiliations and actually do their work, represent the members of the public, represent the views of the people, and ensure that the individuals who are appointed to those offices meet the constitutional requirements under Article 10 and under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. I will straight allow Mr. Nyakundi.
Sorry, Mano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, this is Abner. If I could perhaps speak, I think there are 2 or 3 questions that...
Yes, proceed, Council.
Thank you.
Proceed, Council.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll just straight deal. There was a question as to whether those who have been reappointed are subject to vetting. I believe that once the Gazette notice was at secretary, then the process starts afresh in terms of vetting. So I believe that they will be subject to vetting again by Parliament. So just to pick from where you left, we'd encourage members of the public to submit their memorandum if they have views or opinions or something to submit to Parliament in terms of their reservations in terms of their reappointment. Then, secondly, on this legal question as to whether the Gazette notice now touches on character or suitability of office, as you have rightly put, this is a new test as regards to Article 152 of the Constitution. But remember that the biggest test is usually on the suitability in terms of gross violation of the provision of Constitution or unsuitability to hold public office as per Chapter 6. Now, I'm just reminded by the Supreme Court decision, especially as regards, if you can remember, the two legislators, somebody like Ferdinand Waititu and Mike Sonko. Remember, it is the Supreme Court that held that they are unsuitable to hold public office. So I think maybe it's subject to court decisions, because now perhaps they may appeal to courts and say that perhaps the test as to their suitability to hold public office has been exhausted in terms of the legal processes. But remember, Article 1 still gives the supreme power to the people and to the relevant houses in terms of Parliament. So we'd encourage members of the public to submit the memorandum in terms of their unsuitability, if they feel so that it can be considered by Parliament during the vetting process. Thank you.
Hi, Mano, can you hear me?
Thank you, Abner. Yes, PLO, proceed kindly.
Thank you, and good morning to all the patriots again who joined this space. Good morning, my able president, Mano, and the rest of my learned friends on board. So just to pick up on where the president left on the platform, the online platform on public participation, to just enhance the effectiveness of the comments and issues that members of the public raise on different spheres or a spectrum of governance matters. I'd like to inform you that currently we have two policy and legislative in Parliament. One is Assembly Bill number 50. As you've seen, Article 10 on national values and principles of governance. Can't you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right, thanks. Thank you. So I was mentioning the Public Participation Bill 2023 as one of the legislative interventions that we've had, in the past few months. On Article 10 on the national principles, on the national values and principles of governance, public participation forms a key component and item on such principles. So Parliament has never ever enacted a public participation bill until last year, in September, 1st September, when that bill matured, and it was first read. It was first read on 12th of October 2023. So it is still pending before the National Assembly. And then the other, intervention is on the public policy, the public participation policy. This is the sessional paper number 3 of 2023. So these two items, once they have been formed up, then they will give a clear framework on matters public participation, because it's been long overdue since the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Almost 13 years later, that's when we are having a policy and legislative intervention on matters public participation. So I think that is a tragedy that ought to have been remedied ages ago. But nonetheless, we will take what we have and, at least make sure we have a firm foundation, where members of the public can effectively participate on different issues of governance. To move on to the issue of cabinet secretaries, where, someone asked, how how will the degazettement of an entire battalion of cabinet secretaries be again some or those components of those who are dismissed still form part of the 11 member nominee that were announced yesterday. So technically, I mean, even without going further, the president in nominating not just 6, but even one of the dismissed cabinet secretaries is in gross violation of the Constitution and is in gross violation of the oath of office he took, when he was sworn, into office. Because when you look at Article 75 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that provides for the conduct of state offices, and I'll move straight to sub-Article 3 under Article 75, and this is the Constitution, the apex law, which provides that a person who has been dismissed or otherwise removed from office for contravention of the provisions specified in Clause 2 is disqualified from holding any other state office. And sub-article 3 is read conjunctively with sub-article 2 and with sub-article 1. And sub-article 1 of that particular provision of the law, which provides that any state officer or a state officer shall behave, whether in public and official life, in private life, or in association with other persons, in a manner that avoids. I'll just go straight to paragraph C. Not even paragraph A and B, paragraph C, demeaning the office the officer holds. And all these grounds are what, is constituted under, sub-article 2, which sub-article 3 now, gives the final verdict that whichever clause, I mean, whether it's, sub-article 1, sub-article 2, but the final verdict under sub-article 3 that states that the moment you're dismissal, technically, it means the vote of confidence is passed against you. I mean, it means that you have demeaned the office, that you hold as a state officer, and CS is part of that. So why would a president, if at all, he was in good faith, with consultation, I don't know to the extent of the consultation he made, but for me, this is gross violation of the Constitution. None of those who are dismissed from office, when the entire cabinet was sent packing, should have been in any way either perceived or real be nominated as a cabinet secretary. So that is the position that I think the president ought to have followed. That is the law as it is, not the law as it ought to be. The president is trying to rewrite the apex law, and that is, one tragedy, especially emanating from, one person who is meant to be a symbol of national unity, being a divisive figure, to the country. And then the last question I would want to answer was on the issue of involvement of the public and state officer on political activities. Back then, the Commission on Administrative Justice, that is the Office of the Ombudsman, gave an advisory opinion on the participation of public officers and the use of public resources in political activities. So I will just go directly to some of the recommendations that the Ombudsman made, because when they are by law allowed in accordance with Article 249, sub-Article 1, and the Commission on Administrative Justice, Act 2011, as read, together with Article 59, sub-Article 4 of the Constitution. So when you look at the kind of recommendations that they made, which I think neither the previous government nor this government has bothered, incorporating. That's why you have, all these Harambes being banned for nothing, which in accordance with the president, that there was no law that actually banned Harambe. But there is, ours is just a moral issue. All of these things are dictated by law. When you look at the Section 13 of the Public Officers Ethics Act, it outlaws any state or public officer from using their office to solicit for either Harambes or to contribute, all those things. But people just don't read for the sake of their own reasons. So on the recommendations by the Office of the Ombudsman, one, they said that any appointed public officer should refrain from participating in the activities of political parties or candidates or use the public resources for such activities. The second recommendation that the Ombudsman made was that any appointed public officer who wish to participate in politics or support any political party or candidate should resign from their positions immediately. And I think that is the crux of the recommendation that ought to have been followed. But as was once, synonymous with the former majority leader of the National Assembly, that they would rather die than resign. So I think resignation with our public officers aren't synonymous with exactly what they practice. And then moving away from that, the government itself issued a circular, on 22nd of December 2011. And this was about this circular was circulated or disseminated to the PSs, who are the accounting officers in every ministry. It was circulated to the Auditor General. It was circulated to the Clerk of the National Assembly, the Chief Registrar of the High Court, the Secretary of the Public Service Commission, the Director General of the National Security Intelligence Service, and the Secretary Teachers Service Commission, right? And it just dealt with the political neutrality and integrity of state and public, offices. But this circular as well hasn't been fully implemented. Yeah, that is all from me. Back to you, Manuel.
Thank you, PLO, for those submissions. Perhaps if we can take another round. Josephine, are you there? You have the microphone.
Simple question. Hello, Manuel.
Yes.
Very simple question, so I can even drop off as a speaker. Could the society provide us a format for memoranda, making it easy, so that, for example, if I have a format for memoranda, I can then fill it out myself and forward on to the National Assembly? That's number one. Just some guidance on memoranda, so that our memoranda are very professional and very well done. I've done this before, but it's not what we do every day. So that would give it, some good credibility. Number two, police killings have been a nightmare since this revolution began. Police killings have been a nightmare. And Kindiki was on a national televised media house where he was asked a direct question. And I'm asking the society here because it's full of lawyers. Kindiki was asked, when Parliament was overrun by citizens, who are the people who were carrying high caliber weapons, AK-47s, M16s, etc., in civilian clothes and masks? And he was asked, who were those people? And Kindiki answered, I don't know who those people are, and I'm telling you, I'm the Minister of Interior, and I don't know anybody who was firing a revolver, a pistol, a high caliber weapon on Parliament grounds. Those are not my officers, and I don't know who they are, and they have to face the law. My question to the society is a man like that eligible to go back to the Interior docket as Cabinet Secretary? I mean, what are we saying? A sniper killed an unarmed Kenyan, actually many clothed in the flag and demonstrating peacefully. They were not armed. So how is he even eligible to go back as Cabinet Secretary Interior? That's just a humble and simple question, and we want answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those questions and submissions. Maundu, were you there?
Yes, I'm right here. So I have three questions. And the first one will be the recovery of lost funds through corruption, and the culprits are never prosecuted. I don't remember a moment when we had a minister or a CS who was prosecuted for embezzling the public funds. Also, the long-term accountability policy that we should put in the system. Since independence, we have seen revolutions come and go. Like the 1992, let's say it's our parents who fought for that democracy. But after the democracy, we don't see any policy that was put into place that could help so that we don't fall back into corruption or dictatorship. Also, the Auditor General always gives their recommendations after they audit the reports, which are never followed in the county governments rest the national government. Those are my questions, and also the public participation. How can it be considered and to be implemented by the government? We had a senator, one of the senators saying that these recommendations by the public are never put into any consideration. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. June, kindly you have the microphone. Proceed.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I have two questions. My first one is to LSK as a body. I want to ask whether or not it's possible for you to get together with Amnesty International and Kenya Human Rights Commission and file human rights violations and war crime charges at the ICC towards the police heads, the cabinet secretary that got fired and is somehow getting rehired, and every police head that was in any county where somebody died, just a joint level, like a joint suit, like war crime charges, also including like police officers going to hospitals, because hospitals are protected under the Geneva Convention. So that was also like gross violation of human rights. So is it possible for LSK and the rest of the human rights bodies to come up with and just sue them? Like, because the police have been acting the way they've been acting because there have been no consequences for what they've been doing. Like, they literally are just killing people with no consequences. And I don't think anybody even trusts the Kenyan court to even hold them. And even any citizen who was like kidnapped or anything, you can't even like trust that you will be safe as like a witness, because you will be going and facing someone who can come into your home and break in and then just like kidnap you. So is it possible for you to take it up and go above and just go to ICC directly and file war crime charges and crimes against humanity against all these individuals, including all the officers who are also found and named on like the X timelines? Because like Rex's killer as well has already been identified. So is it possible for that to happen? My second point is towards like the cabinet secretaries. I think the problem began when we allowed that individual to go and consult himself and pick from his basket of sycophants. So maybe the citizens movement should front their own cabinet, because he obviously cannot be trusted to bring individuals who are qualified. So maybe the citizens themselves should form their own cabinet and front it and tell him, pick here, because it clearly looks like you're not able to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, June. We can take one more, then perhaps we can have responses from the advocates on the forum. Brian Casey. Brian Casey, you have the microphone, kindly. If Brian is not there, we have Simon. Simon? Okay. President, are you there? Perhaps we can take up responses even as we wait for the other questions. And I think before you pick it up, and June has raised substantive questions in terms of instituting a case before the ICC. I think I will leave that to you for purpose of response. A question was asked by Josephine about whether we can, as the Law Society, present a format for the memorandum. If you haven't noticed, all the communications and the memoranda that the Law Society presents to the National Assembly are often shared in our forums and shared to the members of the public. But again, that is a challenge you've given us. We have a committee that is specialized to deal with the memoranda to the National Assembly, and we will be able to perhaps share a format to the members of the public through those forums for purposes of any individual who wants to present their grievances on the cabinet secretary appointees, while the vetting when the vetting starts in Parliament, can be able to actually present their views through that process. But I want to also highlight that there is no specific format for communication. If you have information, the Constitution has shied away from procedural, what we call in law, the procedural technicalities. It's the substance of what you write. You can write it on a paper, you can write it on an email, you can communicate whichever way. And I think that is the simplest way to address that question. There is no mode of presentation that is unacceptable. As long as that mode of presentation has been facilitated through the channels that are available, then it's acceptable by Parliament, and they have no reason whatsoever under the law to reject a proposal that has been presented by a member of the public. And I think we have spoken over and over again on the process of public participation and how important your views are, considering that largely the individuals we elected to represent us in Parliament have abdicated on their duty to perhaps even go to their constituents and ask them, what do you need which position are you taking on these cabinet secretaries? What do you need me to address in Parliament? Which side do you want me to vote? Because that mandate, which is donated by the members of the public, seems to be misused by the members of members of Parliament and donated to, party affiliations. And I think that is the genesis of the big problem we have in Kenya, because we have a National Assembly which has huge powers under the Constitution, but we have individuals in those offices who do not actually know how to exercise those powers they have been given. There is a question on whether there's a question that was asked on the recovery of lost funds. I think, Madam President, if you can address that together with June's question on whether there's a possibility of a coalition of suits with other civil societies before the International Criminal Court. If you're there, Madam President.
The issue on lost funds or recovery, well, investigations must be done, and those are hue and cry, and we have agencies that can carry out investigations to ascertain where monies were stolen and tracing to be done. We have the Assets Recovery Authority, and we can also raise those concerns to the Director of Public Prosecutions that he can direct investigations to be done so that the same may be handled and tabled before the citizens, and we see charges being laid. Because as much as you can try private prosecution, it's important that also these agencies that have the capacity and the resources to actually do proper investigations and tracing and get access through court orders to different accounts, they actually implement and carry out their work on that. I noticed there are quite also still a number of advocates. I didn't get the second question, Manwa.
The question was whether the Law Society can lodge a class case before the International Criminal Court alongside other civil society. I thought it's important that you address that question.
We've been working with
yourself.
the various civil society organizations. The question is the threshold, and that's why we are collecting information, we are collecting data as we analyze and what tangible information that can be presented, because it's normally how the threshold to establish whether the criminal courts, the International Criminal Court of Justice can take up the matter. However, the other avenues that we can invite international organizations to come and also monitor and investigate, so that irrespective of the fact that we may not meet the threshold to the International Criminal Court, there are special rapporteurs who carry out who based on what's going on in a nation can come in as well and investigate or monitor the situation so that things do not degenerate any further.
Thank you, Madam President. I think June also asked a question on the consequences. I think as the Law Society, we have done what we had to do, and we are requesting for the members of the public to channel information. If you know an individual is held in a particular police station, communicate that information to the Law Society. If you know someone has been held beyond that period that is constitutional, if you know that a police officer, a specific police officer who took away someone's life, who injured an individual, who committed those atrocities, it's very important that if you have documentation in form of even videos, photos, and identity, perhaps it's important that you actually channel that information to the Law Society. I indicated earlier that we have a toll number, and it's on the social pages of the Law Society of Kenya. The number is 0800720434. You can access the same on our pages, and then help us have that data for purposes of instituting proceedings. So far, we have cases in court, and nowadays I believe the responsibility has shifted from the office, because we know the individuals who hold these offices hide behind those offices to actually conduct atrocities and maim members of the public. And so some of the suits that we have filed in court are, we have specifically sued or mentioned as respondents the heads of those institutions, the heads of those police officers, the OCS, the IG himself, the acting IG, or any other person in those offices, for purposes of answering to the atrocities meted against the members of the public. We have habeas corpus. I mean, the number of cases we have filed on disappearances, on people who have disappeared, are now approaching 15. And in all those, of course, some of whom are, some individuals who have already been released, you will notice that the majority of the individuals who were arrested have already, who are arrested and who are disappeared have already been released. But there are some people who have been found to have been murdered. And so the Law Society is still following up on those individual cases of murder. And I think so far, it's important that you channel the information. If you know a family who, or an individual who was shot, who was injured by the police, and you know that they did not commit any offense, in any case, the police have no right to shoot people demonstrating peacefully in the streets. Channel that information to the Law Society of Kenya. We can take another round of questions now that we have a majority, quite a number of advocates here. Wakili, Steve, welcome. We can have Simon, then Mark. Simon, kindly. Simon, are you there? Eddie?
Yeah, my question was, now that the president has reappointed 6 of the people that he dismissed previously, will they still undergo vetting? And then for somebody like Kindiki, who we all know ordered for the police brutality before, is he still culpable of being responsible for the innocent lives that we lost? And how will we go about it as citizens? And then there's an issue that has been tabled as a bill by the senator for Kiambu on turning all the money allocated for CDF bursary into capitation. Is it possible that citizens can call out for this thing, so that the government can actually implement that thing and make education free using that CDF bursary allocation, instead of it being put in the hands of MP, while at the same time the courts are declared CDF as unconstitutional? That was my question.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Joyous, is it Joyous or Joy? Kindly, if you have the microphone. Eddie, Millicent, Nyakundi, Nyakundi, are you there? Mark? Can someone hear me?
I can hear you, Jim.
Okay. Jayus, I don't know how that name is pronounced. If you can hear me, kindly proceed. Mark? PLO, kindly if you can pick up on some of the questions even as we add more speakers.
Hi, can you hear me? There's that last bit of that particular question that I'm trying to connect to what I have with me. So just to recap, the last bit, Manuel.
Yes, which question?
Should be the second last question, I believe.
I think the question was on the vetting process, and I think that had already been answered earlier. Perhaps if you can respond to the same, and then the question of Kindiki taking up the same appointment, and the question of the killings that happened under his watch.
Well, thank you. First things first, I mean, Professor Kithure Kindiki, as the media, has been highlighting the same as being an international lawyer. For me, I think one can't be an internationally recognized lawyer if one doesn't conform to the international standards on human rights protection and the best practices that actually do govern not just the right to protest, but equally the right to life, which is domesticated under our laws under Article 26. So he is first an advocate, actually, before he is a cabinet secretary. And prior to him being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, he is a citizen, by birth. So it behooves me that, one, an advocate of the High Court, I mean, a member of the Law Society of Kenya, person who took an oath to protect, defend, and uphold the rule of law will be the same person who will come and violate all these human rights without blinking. And for him, it's actually more or less like, doing that which his office, mandates him to do. But it is wrong. One, on the context of him actually not, speaking on the basis of, protection of human rights. I mean, safeguarding the right to protest under Article 37. Equally, I mean, just trying to whip, the Inspector General of Police. I mean, the commandants, under him. But for him, it's about optics over accountability, and that's what is ailing our nation. Because ours, like I said, is just It's just a moral issue. I mean, we have laws, we have good laws with us, but the people implementing those laws are the people who defile, the same laws, and having no issue to the same. Kindiki, just like the rest of the cabinet secretaries who are dismissed from office, should not even be vetted. Why? Because they are already dismissed by virtue of, bringing shame and dishonor or disrepute to the office they held. And like I earlier mentioned on Article 75(3), that is enough for the president. Not to keep on defiling the law, because what the president is doing is contempt. It is spitting, on fundamental, rights and freedom. The oath of office that he took when he was being sworn into office. So anyone who was dismissed from that particular list should not even feature, anywhere as a nominee. Let other new, fresh and blood people who were not part and parcel of a previous cabinet, to come and take the chances, because Kenya isn't short of, capable people. Leaders with ethics and integrity. I saw the tweet by the Homa Bay Town MP. I don't want to mention his name, because sometimes, equally, it's tragic, how people think. And when he says that, those were in the previous cabinet will never be vetted in this new cabinet. That's a wrong position. The only time that vetting will never take place if there is a reshuffle. But the moment you're dismissed from office, you have to undergo vetting. But there's a catch. If you're dismissed from office, you're not even supposed to form, part of that list of persons that, the National Assembly will be vetting. So I think there is a lot of misinformation, and some coming from people that we would think could have held, others in power to be accountable of their actions, but that the same people, trying to dig, the hole far much deeper than we already have found ourselves in. So that's how I'll respond to that question. On the issue of the killings, yeah, it's tragic, and but not just Rex, Kenyeki, but even 50 plus, souls that we lost. I saw the other day the Daily Nation published, the headline with 50, souls that we've lost along the way, deaths that could have been avoided. So I think accountability, not just for the IG who apparently resigned, but even, those still in office. So back to you, Manuel. So I'll be listening into more of the questions and respond later.
Thank you, PLO. Thomas, you have the microphone. Kindly proceed.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to ask 3 questions. Number one, you realize that there are so many people who are getting arrested, and these people, these people are getting arrested. Some, they don't have access to lawyers. So suppose I have been arrested and taken to court, and in that case you find that I don't have money to pay a lawyer. 2, I don't have access to any lawyer. So what am I supposed to do in that scenario where I've been arrested because of demonstration, I've been taken to court, I don't have money to pay for a lawyer. 2, I don't have any access to a lawyer. So what am I supposed to do to proceed? Because you realize most of the citizens who are getting arrested, they don't have that capacity to access to lawyers. What are they supposed to do? Then question number 2 is about the Law Society. You need to explain to us that is it fair that every moment we have a public participation, it is only happening in Nairobi, it is only happening to those people who have access to technology. You are being told to send your memoranda through email. So is there a way we can expand the public participation even to the chief's level, whereby a person in Lamu, a person in Wajir can be able to proceed to the chief's office, give the memoranda, and then the government takes over from there? Because when we limit the public participation only to be happening in Nairobi. On the TV, we see in the TV people in the boardroom participating in the public participation and the environments of the big cities. So what is the space of that citizen in Busia? What is the space of a citizen in Turkana and in all those marginalized areas? So is there a way we can expand the public participation to be taking place through the government avenues, that is through the chiefs, so that we can get close to the people? Then question number 3, the Law Society, please. I want to ask you to, on the issue of corruption, is there a way the Law Society can regulate its lawyers to the level that you limit your lawyers not to be taking cases of corruption of people who have been accused of corruption of like 1 million, 100 million plus, those big cases. So as we handle the issue of corruption, we have seen lawyers representing people who have been involved in capital crimes. So is there a way Law Society can regulate their lawyers so that we handle the issue of corruption by not representing those guys who have been involved in capital crimes? Because I know of a lawyer, I will not mention the name, who doesn't take a case of CK, that is canon knowledge. There are those lawyers, you present to them such a case, they will not take it. So if we have a lawyer who doesn't take those cases as a way of trying to bring good moral in the society, so is there a way LSK can also regulate its lawyers so that we limit the issue of corruption by not representing those big thieves in courts? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll take one more, then get the intervention of the President. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande, are you there? Okay, Laibon. Mr. Laibon. Ngeve. Ngeve, are you there? Big ticket. Kindly don't request the microphone if you do not have any contributions to make, so that we allow many contributors. Even as we wait for those other questions, I think some fundamental questions have been placed, especially on LSK by Thomas. I will start with your last question, and I'll allow the President to respond to some of the other questions. On the question of advocates representing corrupt people who are involved in corruption, it's not in the place of the Law Society to regulate its members as to which client you will pick as an individual and which client you will not pick. That is the responsibility of the advocate. They are advocates of the High Court of Kenya. They have the best judgment to choose who to represent and who not to represent. And secondly, there is something we call in law the cab rank rule. The cab rank rule requires that an advocate cannot refuse to represent someone. And again, I put this scenario. We have had people who have been involved in robbery violence shot by police officers. When they are arrested, they are taken to court. They have a right to be treated. And doctors do not refuse to treat people who have been injured while committing a crime. And so there's a reason why the law provides that an advocate cannot actually refuse to represent an individual, because under our constitution, every accused person has a right to be represented by an advocate of their choice. And the reason why the law envisions that is so that you can help, the advocate helps the court largely to ensure that an innocent person is not convicted of an offense. Remember, it's not the advocate who determines whether someone is guilty or not. The advocate's work is to represent that person and to ensure that the due process of the law is properly followed, to ensure that the crime so alleged to have been committed, the person so alleged to have committed the crime is subjected through a due process as the law provides, so that when a conviction is made, the rule of law is perceived to have been followed. You've asked a question about access to lawyers, especially the individuals who have been arrested. I think we have been very vocal as the Law Society on representation of individuals who have been arrested by the members, by police officers. And across the country, we have advocates representing accused persons, specifically individuals who have been exercising their right under Article 37 on assembly and picketing. And these advocates have been doing this work pro bono on behalf of the Law Society across the country. And so if you are arrested and you think you're produced in court, trust me, there will be representation from the Law Society on the question if you are arrested while demonstrating peacefully. If you committed other offenses like destruction of property, other offenses that were not specifically in line with Article 37, then the Law Society might not want to take up that matter, because any other crime beyond that, you have a right to look for your own advocate to be able to represent you. But if you are arrested in line, and of course we know there are trumped up charges, certain police officers purport to draw trumped up charges, and I want to thank the DPP somehow to an extent for refusing to charge or allow a charge that essentially is trumped up. And of course, we are keen to look at those charge sheets before we even pick up representation. And it's very important that you know that those are the people we offer representation to across the country. That pro bono service is available to the members of the public through the Law Society of Kenya. And I think the last question you asked was the public participation. I don't know whether, Madam President, you can pick that up, the question on public participation to be being devolved across the country. If you can hear me.
I will, on public participation, that is something that we've talked about, something that we have this.
Sorry, we lost you, Madam President.
On public participation, the issue that arises is, yes, having to deliver your documentation, but also government ideally should be able to facilitate public participation. And that is why we're looking at, this will be part of the recommendations we'll be picking with regards to how can we ensure we facilitate public participation, that people's views from all over the country can be obtained. And even if it's a platform, we're thinking around a platform that everyone can be able to share views and that it's received. And it's a open and transparent platform that not necessarily to be controlled by government, but open to all members of the public, that you're able to share your views, and even different avenues that we can ensure that whatever memorandum you present, that they're able to reach the destination that ought to. And so that is something that we can think around, because when it comes to bill, government organizes public participation, but we've also seen the concerns over a period of time that where the public participation barazas are hosted are far away from people, so to effectively ensure that certain people are not able to participate. So that is something we'll be thinking around and seeing how to ensure we are able to enable public participation. Someone asked about vetting, and I say vetting must be done for the nominees, because such an analogy that they don't go for vetting afresh would mean that as long as you are ever a public, you are CS or a PS, then even when a new president comes, then you don't need to go to vetting. That's a very narrow-minded perception. Even these CSAs ought to be vetted and people share concerns, even within the tenure that they have held those particular offices, as to why they should be granted that other opportunity to continue to serve the people of Kenya. And so vetting must be done, and that's why you have that option to share your memorandum, share your views with your member of parliament or the National Assembly, such that these nominees, Parliament can be able to vet them, take into consideration any views, accusations, or complaints that may have even arisen within their tenure for the old ones that have held office. Then, of course, the new ones must be vetted.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Can we have Kefa?
Hello?
Kefa, we can hear you. Proceed kindly.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, this is James, not Kefa. But
Okay,
I can
James,
just
proceed.
speak. I want to just raise two issues. First of all, thank you for this forum. I think we're also learning so much. But I have just something different a bit. First of all, we are having sometimes two or three parallel spaces speaking about the same thing, X spaces speaking about the same thing. So maybe I think to